Behind their perfect smiles, the Johnsons' children were hiding painful secrets. Lily's silence was masking a relentless bullying nightmare, while Jack's reckless behavior was a cry for help. What happens when parents finally realize their kids are suffering, and it's almost too late? In a quiet, picturesque suburban neighborhood, the Johnson family seemed to have everything anyone could want. A beautiful home, steady jobs, and two wonderful kids, Lily and Jack, who seemed to be thriving. To the outside world, they were the perfect family, the ones others admired for their success and happiness. Lily, the 12-year-old daughter, had always been a star student. She excelled in school, took part in extracurricular activities, and was known for her sunny disposition. But recently, something had changed. Her grades, once impeccable, began to slip. She became quiet, withdrawing into herself more and more. Her parents, busy with work and life, hadn't noticed at first. Jack, the younger brother, had always been a handful. Mischievous, playful, and often getting into trouble, his parents chalked his behavior up to a typical rebellious phase. But lately things had taken a darker turn. Jack started sneaking out at night, hanging out with kids who had reputations for being troublemakers. He picked fights at school, ignored his chores, and was constantly getting into arguments with his parents. One evening, after yet another phone call from Jack's school about his behavior, the Johnsons sat down for a family meeting. They were both concerned, confused, and terrified of what was happening to their children. "Jack," his father said gently, "what's going on? Why are you acting like this?" Jack avoided eye contact, his usual defiant attitude replaced with a distant look. Before he could respond, Lily, sitting quietly on the couch, suddenly spoke up in a choked voice. "Mom, Dad, I didn't know how to tell you," she began, her words trembling with emotion. "There's a group of kids at school. They've been bullying me for weeks. I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want you to worry, but I'm really scared. And Jack, he's been getting involved with the wrong crowd. I know he's just trying to fit in, but I'm scared for him too." The words hit the Johnsons like a punch to the stomach. They had been so focused on their jobs and routines that they had missed all the signs. The way Lily had grown quieter, the way Jack had become more rebellious. Their children, who they thought were doing well, were struggling in ways they couldn't have imagined. "Why didn't you tell us earlier?" her mother asked softly, her voice cracking with guilt. "I didn't want to make you worry," Lily whispered, wiping away a tear. "I didn't want to be a burden." Her parents sat in stunned silence, the weight of their ignorance settling in. How had they missed this? How had they let their children suffer in silence while they were too busy with their own lives? The conversation that followed was one of painful revelations. The Johnsons promised each other that things would change. They couldn't undo the damage, but they could do better. Be more present, more involved. They would listen, really listen, to their kids and take action before it was too late. And so began the journey of healing for the Johnson family. A journey that would not only help their children rebuild their confidence and trust, but would also teach them a valuable lesson about the importance of being truly present in their children's lives. The following days were filled with a flurry of activity as the Johnsons set about making things right. They began by setting aside more time to spend with Lily and Jack, ensuring that their focus was no longer divided between work and family. For the first time in a long while, they truly listened to their children. Lily's schoolwork continued to falter, but her parents now understood that the problem ran much deeper than just falling behind. The bullying at school was relentless, and it had worn down her confidence. The taunts, the whispers, and the cruel rumors had left her feeling isolated and vulnerable. "I don't want to go back," Lily confessed one evening as she sat at the kitchen table, her hands nervously playing with the edges of her homework. "Every day feels like a battle. I just want it to stop." Her parents listened, and it was the first time Lily had felt truly heard. They promised her they would take action, not just by speaking to the school, but by helping her rebuild her sense of self-worth and strength. Jack, too, began to open up in ways he hadn't before. At first, his parents' attempts to talk to him were met with resistance. He wasn't used to sharing his feelings, and his pride kept him from acknowledging the pain he was hiding. But when his parents spoke to him with patience and empathy, he began to unravel the reasons behind his reckless behavior. "I didn't know how to fit in," Jack admitted one night, his voice barely above a whisper. "The kids I hang out with, they don't care about anything. They just get it. But I know it's wrong. I don't want to end up like them." His mother took his hand gently, her heart aching as she realized the pressure her son had been under, trying to find a sense of belonging. They talked long into the night, discussing his fears and insecurities and how he could make better choices without losing himself in the process. As a family, they began to explore counseling for both kids. Lily worked with a therapist to cope with the trauma of bullying, learning how to assert herself and rebuild her confidence. Jack's sessions focused on his behavior and the deeper issues that were fueling his desire to act out, his fear of being invisible, of not being understood. The Johnsons also took steps to be more involved in their children's school lives. They met with Lily's teachers to ensure the bullying was addressed, and Jack's school made efforts to connect him with a mentor who could guide him in the right direction. The journey was not easy. There were setbacks along the way, days when Lily's anxiety was overwhelming or when Jack slipped back into old habits. But the Johnsons didn't give up. Slowly but surely, the children began to show signs of improvement. Lily started talking more, no longer hiding in silence, and Jack, although still rebellious at times, made an effort to distance himself from the bad influences around him. Through it all, the Johnsons grew closer as a family. They learned the value of being present, of looking beyond the surface to understand what their children were truly going through. The importance of emotional health, they now knew, could never be overstated. One afternoon, as the family sat together, in the living room, Jack turned to his parents with a hesitant smile. "Thanks for not giving up on me," he said, his voice sincere. "I'm trying, okay?" Lily nodded, her face lighting up as she spoke next. "And I'm learning to speak, to not hide anymore. It's scary, but it feels better." The Johnsons shared a moment of quiet pride. They had made mistakes, yes, but they had also found a way to make things right. It wasn't about perfection. It was about being there for each other, no matter what. The lessons they had learned from their children's pain would stay with them forever. They became advocates for parents at local schools, speaking openly about their journey, urging others to recognize the signs of emotional distress in their own children before it was too late. "Watch for the quiet signs," Mrs. Johnson would say during their talks. "Listen to what's not being said. No child should feel they have to suffer in silence." And the Johnsons, now stronger and more united than ever, vowed to never let that happen to their family again. Months had passed since the Johnsons had begun their journey toward healing, and while there were still challenges, they had come a long way. Lily was no longer the quiet, withdrawn girl who had been afraid to speak up. She had found her voice, again, and with it, a new sense of strength. She began participating more in class, rejoining extracurricular activities, and slowly rekindling old friendships. The bullying had not completely stopped, but with her parents' support and the intervention of her school, it had been significantly reduced. Jack, too, had made progress. Though his rebellious streak wasn't gone entirely, he had begun to take responsibility for his actions. He stopped sneaking out and had distanced himself from the dangerous crowd that had once given him a sense of belonging. He was more willing to confide in his parents about the pressures he faced and even started working part-time at a local store to earn some money. It wasn't a perfect transformation, but the signs of positive change were clear. The family had become more connected than ever. Their nightly dinners, once quiet and strained, were now filled with conversation and laughter. They made it a habit to check in with each other every day, no matter how busy life got. Their home, once just a place to sleep and eat, had become a sanctuary of openness, trust, and love. One evening, as the Johnsons sat on the couch together watching a movie, Mrs. Johnson turned to her husband. "I'm glad we did this," she said softly, her eyes reflecting the pride she felt. "We might not have gotten everything right, but we're getting better. Our kids are happier, and I think we are too." Mr. Johnson nodded, his expression thoughtful. I never realized how much we were missing, how much we were just assuming. You can't do that with your kids. They need to know you're really there. They both turned their attention to their children. Lily was nestled comfortably beside her mother, laughing at a joke Jack had made, who sat beside his father, his feet propped up on the coffee table. It was a small moment, but to the Johnsons it meant the world. The journey had taught them the importance of truly seeing their children, of knowing that despite their appearances, their smiles, and their achievements, there could be hidden struggles that only open communication and patience could uncover. They had learned to ask the right questions, to listen, and most importantly, to be present, no matter how busy or distracted life became. The Johnsons knew they still had work to do. There would be more struggles, more hurdles to face, but they were no longer afraid. They had learned that when parents are present, when they take the time to understand their children's emotional health, they could navigate even the toughest challenges together. As the credits of the movie rolled, the Johnsons exchanged a contented glance, knowing their family was stronger than ever. They had overcome the silence that had threatened to tear them apart, and now they were ready to face whatever came next, together. And as they closed their eyes that night, the Johnsons could finally rest easy, knowing that no matter what, they would always have each other. The Johnson family's journey toward healing didn't end with their own transformation. As their children's lives began to improve, their story caught the attention of those around them. Neighbors, friends, and even teachers noticed the changes in Lily and Jack, how Lily had grown more confident and Jack more grounded. Their parents' commitment to supporting them emotionally and being truly present had become a quiet inspiration to others. The local school had invited Mrs. Johnson to speak during a parent-teacher meeting, and she hesitated at first, unsure of what to say. But after some encouragement from her husband and children, she agreed. That night, as she stood in front of a room full of parents, she shared their story, the painful truths, the moments of doubt, and the ultimate realization that no child should ever feel they have to suffer in silence. "I know it's not easy to be a parent," she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "But what I've learned through all of this is that sometimes the hardest thing is to really listen, to look past the smiles, past the good grades, past the behavior we expect and see what's really going on inside." The room fell silent as she spoke, her words resonating with the parents in the audience. Many nodded, some even wiped away tears. It wasn't just Lily and Jack's story that Mrs. Johnson was telling. It was the story of every child who had ever hidden their pain, afraid of burdening their parents or not being understood. "We can't afford to wait until things get worse," she continued. "We have to be present every day. We have to ask the hard questions and listen, even when it's uncomfortable." After her talk, parents approached her, sharing their own struggles with their children. Some admitted that they had overlooked the emotional well-being of their kids, just as she and her husband had once done. Others thanked her for the courage to speak up, promising to be more attentive to the silent struggles that so many children face. It wasn't long before the Johnsons were invited to speak at other schools, and soon they were working together with local counselors to create workshops for parents on how to better communicate with their children. The message was simple yet powerful. Listen, be present, and never underestimate the importance of emotional health. As Lily and Jack continued to thrive, they too became more involved in spreading the message. Lily joined a peer support group at school, helping younger students who were being bullied, and Jack volunteered at a local community center, working with kids who struggled with issues like self-esteem and belonging. They both had found their purpose in helping others, just as their parents had found theirs in advocating for better understanding of children's emotional needs. One evening, as they sat down for their usual family dinner, Jack looked up from his plate and said, "You know, I never thought I'd be the type to give advice, but it feels good to help other kids. It's like I finally understand what you've been trying to teach me." Lily nodded in agreement. "I never thought I'd be the one to stand up and talk about my bullying, but I feel stronger now. I think we all do." The Johnsons exchanged a look of pride. It was clear that their family had come full circle, from struggling to understand their children's pain to becoming advocates for the importance of emotional well-being in kids. They had turned their own struggles into a source of strength, not just for their family but for the whole community. As they finished their meal, Mrs. Johnson looked at her husband and smiled. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Mr. Johnson smiled back, his heart full. "Yeah, we have. And we'll keep going. Together." The Johnson family had learned that sometimes the greatest healing comes not from fixing what's broken, but from helping others rise above their own struggles. They had found strength in their vulnerability, and now they were sharing that strength with the world. And so, the ripple effect of their journey continued, spreading across their community, teaching parents and children alike the importance of speaking up, of being heard, and of never suffering in silence. The years went by, and the Johnson family continued to thrive, not just as individuals but as a unit. The changes they had made were now deeply ingrained in their lives. Lily and Jack, both older and wiser, had grown into confident young adults who were passionate about mental health and advocating for others. They had found their voices, not just within their family but in the wider world. Lily had gone on to study psychology in college, inspired by the therapists who had helped her overcome the trauma of bullying. She hoped to become a counselor, one day, to offer the same support to others that she had received. Jack, always the more hands-on type, had taken an interest in community outreach, working with troubled youth to help them find healthier ways to cope with their struggles. The impact of the love and support they had received at home had transformed them into caring, empathetic individuals. Their parents, too, had found new purpose. Mrs. Johnson continued to speak at schools, sharing their family's story and encouraging parents to take a proactive role in their children's emotional health. Mr. Johnson, no longer just a concerned father, had become an active volunteer, mentoring young men in their neighborhood who were struggling with the same issues Jack had faced. Together, they worked with schools and organizations to provide resources for families, helping others avoid the painful lessons they had learned the hard way. One evening, years after they first started their journey, the Johnson family gathered, once again in their living room. The house had changed a little over the years, but the warmth and love they shared had only grown stronger. They were older, wiser, and the bonds between them were unbreakable. As they sat around the table, enjoying a quiet dinner together, Mrs. Johnson looked at her children with a smile. "I'm so proud of both of you," she said, her voice full of emotion. "You've turned your pain into something beautiful. You've helped so many others." Lily and Jack exchanged glances, their faces lighting up with pride. "We couldn't have done it without you guys," Jack said, his voice soft but filled with gratitude. "You were there when we needed you the most. You listened when we didn't know how to speak. And you taught us how to listen," Lily added, her eyes sparkling. "You showed us what really matters." Mr. Johnson nodded, his heart full of pride. "We've learned a lot along the way, haven't we? We've learned that no matter how perfect things might seem on the outside, it's the inside that counts the most," Mrs. Johnson said, her words wise with years of experience. "And no child should ever feel they have to suffer in silence." The family sat in quiet reflection, knowing that their journey was far from over. They had created a legacy, a family that not only overcame their own struggles but also made it their mission to help others find their way through theirs. And in doing so, they had started a ripple that would continue to spread, touching the lives of countless others. As they cleared the table together, laughing and talking about the future, the Johnsons knew that the most important lesson they had learned was this: love, support, and open communication could heal the deepest wounds, and that was a legacy worth leaving. The end.